Once again, a very good evening to everyone. On behalf of the Department of Materials Science and Engineering, University of Moratuwa, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Materials Engineering Awareness session. We are delighted to have you this evening. Today's session is designed to provide an introduction to the field of materials engineering and the exciting opportunities it offers through the experience of two distinguished alumni from our department. We hope their journeys in research and industry will give you a better understanding of the diverse career pathways available in this field. Without further ado, let us begin. To begin today's session, we will hear about the opportunities available in research and academia and what it is like to pursue a career at the forefront of materials science. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nayanthara Hendeniya. Dr. Hendeniya is an alumna of the Department of Materials Science and Engineering, graduating in 2020. She recently completed her PhD in Material Science and Engineering and is an incoming postdoctoral fellow at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, one of the world's leading multidisciplinary research institutions. Her research focuses on advanced polymer materials, self-assembled nanostructures, and nanotechnology, with applications in semiconductor manufacturing, energy storage, and functional materials. In addition to her research, she has actively contributed to mentoring students and promoting research engagement within the engineering community. We are delighted to have her with us this evening to share her academic journey and her experiences in the field of materials engineering. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Nayanthara Hendeniya. Dr. Nayanthara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hanseli. That was a nice introduction. Well, I guess I will start by sharing my screen if I can. All right, so I guess today I will share a little bit about my journey from University of Moratuwa to Iowa State University and then to Berkeley National Lab, and a little bit about me. So yeah, Hanseli explained a lot of things about me, introduced me, so I'm not gonna repeat all of that. But I have been working on a lot of material science research in my PhD, multiple collaborations, and been doing a lot of work in relation to semiconductor industry and also polymer physics and polymer chemistry. I guess what's important here is that the fun fact about me, I really like baking and experimenting in the kitchen. And over time, I've realized that experiments in the kitchen are also kind of material science related. So this is very exciting for me to get into baking and cooking and everything about kitchen. So yeah, that's kind of the fun fact about me. So moving on to how I made the decision about choosing material science and engineering as my discipline in 2016. So this was 10 years ago. I'm just realizing that it was 10 years ago that I made the decision to pursue my higher studies and undergraduate studies in material science and engineering. Um, exactly 10 years ago, I was just like most of you, making a decision about what do I do in this engineering degree. And then I attended a field familiarization event, just like this one, awareness event. And then I realized, oh, there's cool things happening in material science. Nobody really talks about what's actually happening in material science. This is very new to me. But it seems like there's really cool things happening. Um, and over time, I also realized that's exactly what I wanted to do. Although I didn't really connect the dots back then, I was mainly interested in what's happening in material science. But then when I was doing my PhD, I realized that oh, that curiosity, that need to do material science or pursue material science came from a place where I wanted to answer questions like how this is happening, why this is happening. So more in the fundamental level of things. So if you're interested in such things like engineering, but also connecting the fundamental sciences to engineering, material science and engineering sits at the intersection of both of these. So that's kind of what made me choose material science. But I did have these questions, all of these questions, like, will I find a job? Is this the right choice? Is academia or industry? Which one is going to be my final destination? And then, can I study abroad? Do I have chances to, win a scholarship or a fellowship, something like that? And also, even if I saw things that are happening in material science, what actually material science research look like in the global scale? I didn't really have a lot of answers to these questions, but I decided to go with my, desire to pursue material science. And my journey has been really exciting so far. So like I said, I decided to start material science and engineering as my career discipline in 2016. Um, and then I graduated in 2020. So right after my graduation, I joined the department as a research assistant. I was doing post-bachelor research. And then in September 2020, I was also recruited as a temporary lecturer. So I got a lot of teaching and mentoring experience through that 1.5 years of my tenure there. And then I was applying to PhD programs here in the US, and that was 2022. So I was applying for fall 22 cycle. And I received multiple offers from a couple of universities here in the US who is basically doing a lot of nanomaterials research, polymer research, and general material science research. And so, yeah, I chose Iowa State as my final destination. One of the biggest reasons why I decided to go with Iowa State as my PhD program institution is I'm not sure if you've heard about the US National Laboratory System. This is basically where the Department of Energy research is happening most of the times. And here at Iowa State, we have a national lab in our university premises. So it's the only place where a physical premise of a US National Laboratory is. So we have Ames Lab here. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I decided on Iowa State, because Ames Lab is essentially um, specializes in materials research. So that was a big benefit for me to come here so I can gain more experience, basically with national labs and high-end cutting-edge research institutions in the United States. Um, However, Ames Lab is not the only research institution or national lab that I got the chance to work in during my PhD. Last year, in March 2025, I started working at the Berkeley National Lab as a graduate researcher. Um, so I had a lot of experience in synchrotron sciences. Synchrotrons are basically what we call, they are particle accelerators, but we're using it for different kinds of research. And when I was there, I was using synchrotron research for X-ray scattering. That basically is one of the main characterization methods that I've been using. So if you're very interested in what's happening in these synchrotrons, I highly recommend researching about the light sources here in the US and around the globe. there are multiple research facilities that are specialized in synchrotron sciences. This is one of the surprises to me as a material scientist. I didn't even realize that research in particle accelerators and synchrotron facilities are open to material scientists. So in the beginning, when I was a undergraduate student, I wasn't even aware of this. And I thought these are mostly for, heavily physics oriented or fundamental science oriented. But over time, I realized there's a lot of applied research is happening in these facilities, and there's a lot of opportunities for people in material science and other applied engineering disciplines. And then in 2026, a couple months back, I defended my PhD thesis, and with multiple collaborations, Berkeley Lab, Ames Lab, and also Brookhaven National Lab. And then in June 2026, I received the Advanced Light Source Postdoctoral Fellowship in Residence. So I'll be starting my postdoctoral research fellowship in September this year. So this is my journey so far. And I want to talk a little bit about material science in general. I know a lot of you might have the question like, what is actually happening in material science? Where exactly is this important, or what exactly we are doing here? So I want to take a very close example to you, your phone, your mobile phone. If you think about your mobile phone, there's so many components in this phone that is built upon materials. So if you think about who invented the mobile phone or any kind of device, you would think of it as one discipline, but it's not. It's a collaboration of many engineering disciplines. And right at the foundation of all of these innovative techniques and technologies, there is material science. So you can think of this. There's batteries here, and they're all we talk a lot about batteries and enhancing performance of batteries, and semiconductors, which is kind of my specialty area. Without the semiconductors, we won't have fast performing processors and all kinds of electronic circuits. So all of these things, even though it looks like very, I would say it's very application oriented, but the fundamental or the foundation of all of this is how materials are being selected, how materials are being optimized for different applications, different parts of a device. So this is one of the most common and closest examples I can think of, but there are other things that we can actually take examples from the nature and from all the things that we use in our everyday life, that materials is sitting at the very fundamental of all of these things. So what excited me about material science? Exactly what I've been talking about, that we have all of these things at the very intersection. So we, as material scientists, we combine all of the fundamental scientific areas like physics, chemistry, engineering, and computation, all of these things. And then we're sitting at the intersection of the applications of all of these fundamentals. And that gives us the edge. That gives us material scientists the performance edge, because every industry, every innovative industry requires a material scientist to begin with. So whether it is about discovery or whether it is about scaling up the processes, all of these things require a material scientist. And I want to talk a little bit about how my research has evolved, because material science, like you see, as you've seen in the previous slide, we have a lot of application areas It could be whether it is batteries, whether it is drug delivery, whether it is semiconductors. We have so many things happening at the same time. So my research is a perfect example of how flexible a material scientist can be, because I started working on atmospheric plasma when I was a postbachelorate research assistant. I was working on applications of plasma technologies, and that led me to surface engineering. And then surface engineering became polymer self-assembly assisted surface engineering. And polymer self-assembly became more of a edge for nanofabrication. That's kind of the applied research that I've been focusing on. But self-assembly of polymers, they have a lot more other research areas like drug delivery, wound healing, photonic devices, photovoltaics, all of these things. And then from nanofabrication, because I developed an interest for more like hard X-ray sciences, I have experienced a lot of synchrotron X-ray scattering. So this gave me a lot of awareness of the applications of these characterization techniques and also the fundamentals of these characterization techniques. So the underlying physics of synchrotron X-ray scattering, but also in applied research areas. So all of these things combined, how my research evolved, I have become the person who is very flexible in research, so I could actually divert my research into other directions that I have no expertise in. So that's kind of what is going to happen in my postdoctoral fellowship. I'll be working on polyelectrolytes and energy conversion devices and electrolyzers and these things. But I will still be using the techniques that I've learned from my PhD and the techniques that I am aware and learned from my bachelor's and postbachelorate research experiences. So the point here is that because material science gives us an understanding of how the structure determines the properties, that gives us a very flexible research integrity that we can actually apply our knowledge pretty much in anywhere. It's a very flexible engineering discipline, if you think about it. So I get a lot of questions from students and a lot of undergraduates that how research looks like or a graduate study course looks like for a PhD student or a master's student. So how does actually graduate school look like or research looks like? So this is kind of my understanding. This is basically my own experience and also my peers and my friends. They've experienced material science research in different ways. So if I think about it roughly, or how do we actually define research in material science, I would say it's kind of like this. So we do a lot of thinking, we do a lot of hypothesizing, and then we do experiments to test these hypotheses. And we read about these things. We read about previous research, how the previous researchers approached a problem, how they tried to solve it, and what kind of limitations they've had in these research problems and questions. And then we do have a lot of data analysis, and right now, material science is becoming a lot more popular amongst computational scientists as well. So we do get a lot of coding experience. It depends on your research. A computational material scientist might have a larger portion of coding and analytic methods involved. An experimental scientist's research life is probably going to look like this diagram, what we see here. And the other important part about being a researcher, being a scientist, is communicating our findings, communicating with the general public. So this could be either writing, conference presentations, public speaking, sharing our findings in social media platforms, all of these things combined. So one of the more important things I've realized during my PhD and as a scientist is we do have a lot of responsibility in transferring the knowledge to general public. So if you are interested in communicating how science is happening at a lab, but also why it matters to everyday people, being a researcher actually gives you the opportunity and the platform to make awareness, like talk about these things. So that's one of my favorite parts about being a researcher, being able to communicate, being able to tell people stories about research. And these are some of the biggest lessons that I've learned as a student, as a material scientist so far. And they're not just subject. They don't really, sometimes it's not even any kind of subject matter. It's most about, like I said, how to communicate scientific writing and presentations, and how do we use statistics to represent our data, and programming, again, communication as a scientist, and how do we design experiments? How do we think about these things, the critical thinking that we have? One of the most crucial things is networking. How do we find other people that are interested in research, interested in the same problems as we do? How do we find professors, mentors, collaborators? How do we effectively network with these people? All of these things matter to a researcher. This, however, is not only for a material science researcher, research in general. So all of these skills that we acquire, they matter as a scientist, as a researcher, as someone who is working in research. And now I want to talk a little bit about where material science can take you. I think you can think of the closest example that I can give to you is me. I started in Sri Lanka at the University of Moratuwa, and now I'm working in the US. So we have here in the US, we have a very highly credited, highly regarded material science and engineering industry, because a lot of research happens in these areas, especially semiconductors, battery-related research, medical devices, and space. I can give you one of the closest examples to me about space research. So in my research group, there is one of my collaborators, one of my lab mates actually is working on what we call the ablative materials. They are being used in rockets and space shuttles as a heat-resistant layer. So we do work a lot in these research areas, aerospace and space-related research, especially the materials science of space research. And also cutting-edge advanced materials such as I'm not sure if you've heard about metamaterials. So this is one of the things that people are talking about these days. So United States, we have strong research in material science happening in other places in the world like Europe, Singapore, Australia, South Korea, Japan. Especially Japan and South Korea, semiconductors, display technologies, all these things, Samsung, you to name a few. And again, if you think about Australia, we see a lot of research happening in critical materials recovery, mining industry, all of these things. So there's so many research areas, so many industries around the world that a material scientist can be a big advantage to. And that's why we want to think about why actually companies hire material scientists, because we enable products. Material science and engineering is a enabling engineering discipline. we are a part of manufacturing. We are a part of failure analysis. We are a part of choosing materials, new materials, and scaling up. So any process that we develop in a lab, in purely in a research environment, when we apply that in industry, when we try to scale it up into the industry, we have to think about what kind of processes, what kind of materials that would help us actually scale this process up into industrial scale. So that is one of the biggest challenges we have as researchers, scaling things up. So even if it is a process that is developed by, say, another discipline or another scientist, a material scientist always comes to the discussion and to the table when we think about scaling things up. And how do we quality control of the products and product development? So we, as material scientists, enable a lot of industries. And speaking of industries, I can say a few things about the industries in the United States, how the global scale of material science is working. So if you look at this little table here, you can see we have opportunities in major companies like Apple, Nvidia, Intel, Microsoft, Amazon. Although these may sound like they are more computer science, electronics, it does come to our mind as such, but there are opportunities for material scientists in these companies, these big tech companies. While they may not be as prominent, they still need material scientists to develop their products, optimize their processes. However, there are some research industries that material scientists actually lead. For example, Lam Research is a prominent semiconductor manufacturing company in the United States and also Applied Materials. So these are the leading companies in materials research or semiconductor research. And then there are other companies like 3M and Dow. These are polymer specialized industries, and they hire a lot of material scientists. So what I want to, the final takeaway of with these access to industries is material scientists are, in fact, everywhere. If you had the question whether I will, have a job after I pursue a material science and engineering degree, what I can tell you is that question is not like this will answer your question. I'm pretty sure you will hear a lot about industry in Sri Lanka as well. As I can tell you how my industry research internship went. So we did have opportunities in Sri Lanka as material scientists. So I would say there's absolutely no opportunities. But one of the things is that these opportunities don't come to you just, they won't be handed to you on a platter. So you have to look for them. You have to continuously work yourself to get to these places. But if you purely ask about whether there are opportunities, there's plenty. And I also want to talk a little bit about long-term earning potential. This is very nuanced. This is about the US. As you can see, even material science and engineering sits as a very decent, earning potential perspective. If you think about the point of earning potential, it's not really that we work for a low salary. There's comparable salaries for material science and engineers. And one of the biggest reasons why the median or the average looks a little bit low is one, because we work as materials engineers and material scientists very adjacent to places like national labs and academia and all of these bridging institutions. So yes, it may not be as high salary in these places, but if you think about the prominent industries like Lam Research, Applied Materials, Dow and Corning, all of these places, there are comparable salaries to anyone who is in big tech. And why we see higher salary grades for computer scientists, electronic engineers, or all these other disciplines is because most of them are related to big tech and there is money. But on the other hand, yes, money is one factor, but also we have a lot of people working in problems related to these big tech industries. So there's a demand for material scientists to work and solve these problems, especially now in the age of AI. There's a lot of research happening in industry where you can like you want to enhance performance of the devices. You want to conserve energy while highly performing devices, but also saving energy. So there is a pathway opening up for material scientists to solve problems that are related to this new age. So I highly recommend, looking up a little bit about how people are using material science to solve problems in, say, device performance, energy conservation, and also sometimes, especially critical mineral extraction and recovery. So that's a very interesting research field. Um, you can look it up and you will see how important a material scientist could be in all of these things. So now I want to talk a little bit about what I wish someone actually had told me when I was an undergrad. I was like looking for opportunities and study chances. Um, these are the few things that I want to highlight. That networking starts years before graduation. Networking actually starts right when you set your foot into your bachelor's degree and university. That's when you start looking for people who can eventually help you. You can get inspiration from. And also, a lot of people worry about GPA, which is in fact something that I've worried about personally when I was a first year engineering student. And in my first semester, I had 2.65 as my GPA, semester GPA. So that's where I started. Although I chose material science as my degree, I wasn't starting as a high performing student. But eventually I was able to work my way up. But that didn't matter to me much when I was applying to grad school. What mattered to me is my writing capacity and how I presented myself, how I was presenting my scientific findings through publications. All of these things mattered to me more than the GPA. I don't think my GPA was ever a question. Yes, my transcript mattered, what courses that I followed, but not the grade as much. And also, this one thing I would want to highlight really, that don't chase titles. Sometimes people do things for the sake of a title, but that is probably not sustainable. So instead, chase skills where you can learn from, do things that you can learn new skills. So that matters the most when you're developing and when you're growing as a career person or a researcher, whichever, whether it is industry or academia. And another thing, this is one of the questions a lot of students have, a lot of people doubt. Say yes to opportunities when you don't feel ready and apply when you don't feel ready. Because at the end of the day, only thing that you're going to regret is the thing that you didn't apply. You might get a rejection, and it's fine if you get a rejection because you've already applied, you've already worked your way, and you did the best, put your best. to that opportunity. So apply and say yes when you don't feel ready. And if you get a rejection, treat it as a learning opportunity and grow from it. So then you will do better, then you will perform better. And there's no such thing as failures if you want to think about it. It's always a learning opportunity. And the other thing is this unexpected opportunities, unexpected rewards in every career, every industry that we go. So that's another thing to think about. The best opportunities sometimes come unexpectedly, and you don't have to have your entire career planned when you set foot into your undergraduate college or your university. You learn along the way and you grow, and you sometimes outgrow versions of yourself that you thought were the best, and sometimes you find new interests and then you pursue those. So all of these things, I wish someone had told me, so that way I could have had much better, clarity about the decisions that I made. But these are some of the things that I think could help you when you make a decision. And because we've talked about all of these things, I want to highlight some of the things that happened in my journey as, like I said, how failures have become learning opportunities for me, how failures became redirections, rejections became redirections for me. So I didn't start as a perfect student. I had a very low GPA, and then I had another rough semester in semester 5. So all of these things happened, and my industry internship, I didn't perform, or I didn't make the impact that I hoped I could. But then I graduated with a very decent GPA and a second class upper division degree. And then I got into a PhD, but I've had several rejections throughout my PhD journey. I've got rejected from summer schools. I've got rejected as my publications got rejected. And my ALS doctoral fellowship, the first time that I applied, that I got rejected. Several postdoc applications, again, many rejections. But none of those things actually stopped me from doing what I did, pursuing the curiosity. So eventually I graduated with my PhD, just under 4 years. And I also got a fellowship opportunity to continue research. So all of these reds actually turned into a lot of greens. And these are not just achievements, they are a reflection of how I turned some of those rejections into learning opportunities and redirections. So I worked with multiple national labs, and I've had the chance to and the privilege to mentor a lot of graduate and undergraduate students, and I built instrumentation in my lab. Um, I've contributed to funding opportunities, grants and grant proposals, collaborations, and all of these things were possible because I have took my rejection or took my failures, took my weaknesses, and made them into learning opportunities. So the final take-home message that I would want you to take is everything that is presented to you in your undergraduate journey is a learning opportunity. It's just a learning opportunity. And one failure is not going to define your entire career ever. So yeah, these are the things that I want to, make awareness of. And I can answer any questions that you have, specific questions. So I think I would stop here and take any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nanathara, for your inspiring presentation. And we will now move on to the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please submit them through Slido by scanning the QR code displayed on the screen. Or you can use the link and the event code that will be shared in the chat. And we will try to accommodate as many questions as time permits. Also note that your questions through Slido will be anonymous, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have related to material science and engineering. Thank you.
Hansali,
Yes, Dr.
in
Nanathara?
the meantime, how about we discuss a few questions that we've already received through the Google Doc?
Yes, of course.
Um, right. So I am getting a couple questions. So we'll start with one of the questions that we've had in the Google Docs, and then we'll move into the questions in real time.
Okay.
One question that I've received is the higher education pathways available in nanotechnology and smart materials. I feel like a lot of things you can I've explained a few things about how nanotechnology is applicable in cutting edge research areas. And I want to highlight one thing about the terminology nanotechnology. Nanotechnology can appear as several different things in research, and you won't sometimes find nanotechnology. You will sometimes find nano templates, nano drug delivery systems, and nano devices, all of these things. So, nano is a more of a scale. And there's a lot of research happening in nanoscale. For example, what I did in my PhD is trying to understand the property performance relationships in a self-assembling material. We call it the blockopolymers. And these blockopolymers actually self-assemble into nanoscale patterns. So these patterns can be used in lithography, device manufacturing, semiconductor industry. So that's one of the areas that I can describe. And smart materials. And perfect example is the stimuli responsive smart materials like the block copolymers. They are considered smart materials because we apply them in smart applications, as you can think of. So there's a lot of opportunities for nanoscale research and smart and advanced materials research, battery materials, photovoltaics, perovskites, solar cells. And one thing that one of my lab mates is working on, he's working on polymer dielectrics. That is a very interesting topic, and a lot of credentials and a lot of credibility is going in that direction these days, polymer dielectrics. So that's how I can describe materials science in nanotechnology and smart materials. There's a lot of specific and highly specialized research areas related to these things. And both of these terms, nanotechnology and smart materials, they are like big umbrella terms. You can find a lot of nuanced and specific research under these terms. And looking up a few researchers, some things about material science would help you understand how these things are being evolved currently. Yeah, so I think that would help understand what nanotechnology and smart materials research is actually looking like these days. Um, any other questions that we're getting from the Q&A? Aerospace industry research areas. So I mentioned one thing. One of the examples is the ablative materials. That's a really interesting research area. And the project that we're working on currently right now is funded by NASA. So that says a lot about how aerospace industry and space industry is regarding material science, where material science is at in aerospace and space industry. And one thing I want to highlight is if you are a materials researcher or like a materials science and engineering major and undergrad, there are a lot of opportunities in aerospace engineering. They are always looking for people who have the understanding of how these materials work. Because if you think about aerospace industry, if you think about a aeroplane, let's take a very simple example. There's so many things that material science is influencing, especially the material selection. How do we choose materials that would withstand high pressure? All of these things. So yes, and if you want to focus on aerospace industry, aerospace materials, and aerospace research areas, there's so much you can do with material science. And I am happy to, help and give you more information. These are the things that I can think of on the top of my head, but we can discuss more if you want. I will share my contact details later so you can connect with me and talk about these things. And another question is, in graduate school, what is the main focus? Are there any? Can we go back to that question, please? I was reading somebody asked about how the graduate school actually look like, whether there are classroom activities. I think that's the question. So I can tell you about how higher degrees work, especially in the US. If you think about a PhD, you will have a coursework portion in your degree. It would be So for me, my PhD had a coursework portion which was 36 credits, and then I had the rest of my PhD was all research. So the minimum credit requirement was, I think, 72, so 36 coursework credits and 36 research credits. So yes, there is a part that involves coursework. And if I think about how the graduate students actually get involved in coursework and other research and teaching experiences. So in the US, if you're pursuing a higher degree like a PhD, you will be hired as either a graduate research assistant or a graduate teaching assistant. So if you're being hired as a graduate teaching assistant, you also get the chance to teach and assist in teaching. That involves you in the classroom as a instructor, in addition to being that coursework related work that is part of your degree. And if you're being hired as a research assistant, what you will be doing is mostly research, and then you will have the coursework part of your work. So a graduate degree could be a combination of coursework and research. And there are some other countries with different models of graduate degrees. So for instance, the UK and Australia, their PhD degrees are mostly research related. They have a specific project. Usually it takes about 3 years to 3.5 years to finish a PhD in the UK and Australia. They are mostly concentrated on research topics. But the catch here is that to apply for a degree like a PhD in UK and Australia, it is highly advised to have a master's degree first. So you have a coursework component done. But the advantage of starting a PhD in the US is that you can directly apply for a PhD after your bachelor's, like I did. You will have time to complete your coursework. based on the research model that you're working on, and your department, your program, and your advisor, the time that takes for someone to finish a PhD in the US could vary. And it also highly dependent on what kind of research discipline you're working in. Typically, for a engineering major, engineering student who is involved in a higher degree in the US, you can finish your PhD within 3.5 years to 4.5 years, maximum of 5 years. That is only because you are involved in a lot of coursework in the first 1.5 years. So in my case, when I was starting my PhD, I worked on my coursework and my research while building a lab all at the same time, and I still managed to finish my PhD in three years and 10 months. So just under 4 years. So it's possible for someone to do that. And I want to highlight that it varies. It depends on the person, depends on the program, depends on many factors, but it's doable. And uh, the other question, can I get married and pursue a master's or a PhD abroad? If so, how would applying to scholarships work? What are the good opportunities to pursue dreams with my partner? Interesting question and a good question. Yes, you can get married and pursue a higher degree. A lot of students do that. And I don't think that's a factor that would stop you from applying for a master's or a PhD abroad. I got married while I was doing my PhD. So I have a lot of friends. I have a friend who recently had a baby while doing a PhD. So life can happen while you are involved in a higher degree. So that's something a lot of people actually don't think about, but you can do it. And if you want to pursue a degree with your partner, I think that's still possible, and not sure exactly what degrees that are specifically holding you from pursuing a degree with your partner. I have two friends here at MSE. They are both pursuing a material science degree while being married. So it's like you can do it. And what other questions we have? How much does a material science engineer salary typically grow over the years? If possible, could you share the numbers? Um, I can share the numbers, I would say probably later, if that works for you. But what I can tell you is that a growth ceiling is not really that big of a problem. There's a lot of roles that you can advance into. Your entry level might be a little bit lower than tech industries. That's just how it works. If you think about, I can talk about the industry here in the US. A lot of starting salaries are higher in either in tech or sometimes in finance. So finance is not even an engineering discipline, but they get paid really well. But that doesn't stop someone from having a decent salary as a materials engineer. Usually they hire entry point of after PhD, especially after a PhD. I would say material scientists are being hired for a salary, say 100K a year. That's a starting point, but it grows. It grows a lot. And I would say if you are 10 plus years senior, you would probably be in a position where you're making the decisions and consulting. So that would be like yearly annual salary of such a engineer, such a materials engineer. It'd be about 350K and possibly even more. And I also want to highlight that on the academia side, not just industry, a senior professor could be making really big money. So there's not such thing as low salary because you're a materials engineer. What about the competition that materials undergraduates have with other departments in our uni itself when trying for higher studies opportunities? Not sure if there should be a competition because material science is a entirely different research and study discipline. And there's so many options and opportunities for material scientists. This I I'm I'm thinking that's probably not going to be a big problem, a competition that would I would say that might apply if you're applying for the same scholarship or same fellowship as other peers, which is not just for material scientists. If you're in the competition for the same award or the same scholarship, that competition and that playing field applies to everyone evenly. What gives you the edge is how you present yourself for these scholarship opportunities and fellowship opportunities, and that's something you will personally have to work on, profiling, like selling your profile to these opportunities. So I don't think there is a competition, um, like a default competition. The competition itself becomes prominent when you're applying for the same scholarship or the same award. However, without these scholarships and awards, there are so many other options that you can find higher studies opportunities here in the US, in Australia, in New Zealand, UK, Europe, everywhere. Um, doesn't have to go through huge competitions. So in the US, you can directly apply for a PhD after your bachelor's, and a lot of these research institutions hire students as graduate research assistants, and you get one, your tuition is covered, full tuition is covered by the department or your professor. Number two is that you're getting paid to do research. You're getting paid to be a research assistant or a teaching assistant. So your living cost is covered, and any other costs involved, say health insurance, is also covered. So graduate research assistantships and graduate programs in the US is designed in a way that it actually benefits both the student and the institution. And they are not, I would say there is competition because so many other international students apply for these positions. But if you can sell yourself properly, if you can market yourself, if you can present yourself as someone worthy of these positions, there's definitely a chance. I applied to graduate programs directly after my undergraduate degree, and I got 3 PhD offers with full funding. So I'm not sure competition is going to be a problem. And what is the minimum required GPA score to get a scholarship for PhD in the United States? Um, a lot of institutions consider a GPA of 3.3 or higher out of 4, scale of 4, 3.3 or higher is a comparable and competitive GPA. What matters most is how you present yourself. Again, because a lot of applications are not just being evaluated based on your GPA. It will be evaluated on your research experience, your publications, if you have any, your conference presentations, other volunteering experience, how you involved in outreach programs in your undergraduate degree. All of these things matter to your application, and how interested you are, how you present yourself as an interested candidate in a certain degree, certain program, certain research group. So all of these things matter to the application. And as for GPA, 3.3 or higher, sometimes even 3. There are degrees that would accept, especially master's degrees would accept a GPA of 3. And there are other requirements like English language requirements. So those things you might want to consider, but they're not necessarily stopping you from applying to these programs. Really interested. How did you start writing without feeling judged as an imposter? Would blogging be helpful to applying for PhDs? Um, I think I think this is a little more like a personal preference and a personal trait that I have. I do like writing. I do like expressing my ideas. And actually, it helped me a lot in presenting myself in stages and conferences, forums everywhere. And I really do like outreach and programs like this where I can get to meet people. Um, and I think even if it is not just, I sometimes I do this for myself, writing and sharing content with people. I do that for my personal satisfaction. And I I think being judged is something, it tells a lot about the person that is judging me than myself. So I don't really think about whether someone's judging me or not, but I do try to um, provide and share educational content that could help a lot of people. At least I think it helps. So I think that kind of takes away the intimidated part of myself. And would blogging be helpful in applying for PhDs? If you want to improve your writing skills, I would say yes, do it. Um, it could be anything. It could be any kind of any form of writing that helps process your thoughts, that helps articulate your feelings and emotions and your thoughts and everything. Um, Also, I want to highlight one thing. We do have a lot of, AI influence currently these days, especially in terms of writing. Use AI as a tool to assist you in polishing your content later, but put your thoughts into it. Write first a rough sketch, another draft, maybe even a third draft before you get help from AI. But yes, writing, whether it is scientific writing or just regular, creative writing, that certainly helps gathering your thoughts and organizing your thoughts. And it is a helpful way to not just think about things, just put it out, and you can kind of see what you have written. That helps you improve your thinking. And that, again, in the long run, it helps you, your analytical thinking and critical thinking as well. Just the UOM materials science, I think I missed that question. How do we develop English writing skills? Because we're going in the writing skills. I'll jump onto that question as a follow-up. Um, you can improve your English writing skills. I think I can recommend just writing writing about things that you're passionate about. Say whether it's creative writing or something like your storytelling. It could be anything. It could even be something like if you're posting, say you're posting something on Facebook or Instagram or some social media, even that little caption could help you gather thoughts and think about it. So these are some of the little things that you can do. But again, you can do things that are not just writing to improve your writing skills. One thing is reading. Read. Read a lot of things. If you're not familiar with scientific reading, or like reading research articles could probably exhaust you in the beginning. So start reading by fictions or something that you're passionate about. It could be anything. It could be articles, blog articles about tech industry or something that you like. So find one thing that you're interested about and then read about it. That helps a lot. And one of the underrated things that you can do to improve your writing and reading and communication skills is watch TV. I know that sounds a lot like funny advice, but a lot of my communication skills were developed through watching and watching TV shows and movies that are in English. And when you do that, try to do it without subtitles after some time. So you see someone talking, you see someone moving their lips, and try to see that coordination between your eye and your ear and how you process it in your brain. That helps a lot in communication, and eventually it will help you think in English. Gather your thoughts in English. Kind of formulate your ideas in English, and that in the long run helps you write in English. So this is something, this is a good point to think about. And there are ways to improve your language skills. And I acknowledge that some students might find language as a barrier, but there's so many things that we can do to overcome that language barrier. My final year project in polymer science with a average GPA, how do I pivot into biomaterials or semiconductors? Is it okay to work in the industry before higher studies? So I will share my contact details later. We can talk about this question. I think this might be a very personal consulting kind of advice. So let's talk about that later through emails or some other connecting way. I will answer a lot of general questions that is appearing here. What research and technical skills do most applicants lack, and how can I use my final year to bridge the gap between and beyond my transcript? Research and technical skills most applicants lack. I think the biggest that I can think of is analytical thinking and communication. We've talked a lot about communication, and analytical thinking is the one thing that you can use your final year to bridge, especially through your final year project. That is where you get the first systematic research experience and use that experience for your advantage. You can take this experience to do a lot of analytical and critical thinking about your final year project idea. And that's where you can hypothesize, and that's where you can test your hypothesis and reason the results. So all of these things. Yeah. I think we can wrap up the questions here, but I'm happy to help with other questions. If you want to ask questions, I can share my email here. So yeah, we'll connect and we can chat about these things more.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nayanthara, for answering so many questions and for providing your expertise and knowledge on these problems we had related to material science and engineering and your part to research as well. I think we all learned a lot from your session. So once again, thank you very much. And